Welcome back to Econ 103 Microeconomics. I'm Keith Yakucha. In this video, we're going to go through a lecture explaining the background of some of the topics covered in the Unit 6 of the core textbook, Firms and Its Employees. I do want to say, going through this, we are jumping over all the parts to do with asymmetric information, the principal agent problem, and contracts, organization of a firm, and the rest. While this is extremely important topic, that is extremely important in the coverage of the textbook itself, this lecture kicks off more taking a look at some of the quantifiable stuff and usually the place where people get more hung up. That being said, definitely be sure that you read through the portions on asymmetric information, on the principal agent problem, on contracts and incomplete contracts, and the rest, as it does provide the basis, the foundation that is needed to be able to carry on with the rest of this part that we are going to cover here. So that being said, let's go jump over to a bit of a lecture. We're going to start off taking a look at opportunity cost and economic rent. Keith, that sounds like something we've covered right off at the start of the semester. It is, in this case, we're referring to it a little bit different because it's a little bit of a different context, and thus we're taking a look at employment rent. So let's go jump over and take a look at that. Okay, so to explore this idea of the economic rent of employment, that is our employment rent, let's say that we currently make, let's say that we make $20 an hour. Right, so we're making $20 an hour. Farther beyond this, let's say that we have a time horizon. This is our planning horizon. This is how far in advance we really think and we feel like, things are going to influence us. And let's presume that that time horizon that we have is 10 weeks. I'm just going to abbreviate that as WKS. Let's keep in mind, because our wage is in terms of hours, we want to kind of keep things all in one time period. So if we presume 35 hours a week, that is 350 hours of work in that 10-week period. Okay. Well, what we can do then is we can take a look at that and kind of say, well, hey, here is, let's get our vertical axes, let's get our horizontal axes, let's kind of visualize what we're working with here. So here is our time horizon, and what did we say our time horizon is? That was 10 weeks or 350 hours. And then we have our wage. Our wage is $20 an hour. So again, to label our axes, the horizontal is our time horizon, H for horizon. Mind you, this could be in weeks or in hours. And our vertical axis is our wage, W. So to start us off, well, we make $20 an hour, and that would be over the entire horizon here. So we could say, there we go, draw that across. If we were to stay employed, we would get all of this as our income. That is our total income. We're making $20 an hour over 350 hours. So that would be our total income, employment income. Let's write that down. Our total income, I'll denote Y for income in this case, is $20 over 350 hours. 350 hours, that is altogether we are making, what does that work out to? $7,000 over those 10 weeks. Not so bad. But what we need to do then is, in order to say, well, not just our employment income, but what is our employment rent, we need to compare this versus our next best alternative. So what is our next best alternative? In this case, our alternative to being employed is, let's say, being unemployed. So let's take a look at that comparison. And let me just clean up this shaded spot there because we don't really want that. That's not really what we're looking at. So one second. So if our next best alternative is being unemployed, and let's start off by saying that, hey, we actually have no unemployment benefits. So if we're unemployed, we just earn nothing. That sucks. But let's also keep in mind that there's a cost, there's an effort to working. So let's say that we have a cost of effort, we'll call that C for cost of effort, and that is equivalent to $7 an hour. This is our disutility from working. Now, keep in mind, for some jobs, for some professions, you may actually love working there. You may be getting a positive utility or a negative cost in this case from showing up to work. You want to be there, you want to put in the efforts, you get enjoyment from it above and beyond your wage. In our case, we're saying, you know what, showing up to work, great, you get your $20 an hour, but on top of that, you face a cost of 7. Maybe this cost is partly the clothes you need to buy, the fact you need to sit in traffic. Maybe this is just you don't like your job or your coworkers, and it's just an effort to put in every hour that you're there. That is, needless to say, however that works out, let's say that we have this cost of $7 an hour. So that is $7 an hour of each hour that you are working over that time horizon. In this sense, what we see is, well, what is your benefit of working? Well, your economic benefit of working in this case here is your $20 an hour minus your $7 an hour in cost. So this bit here between those two lines, that would be our employment benefit. And so we would get an employment benefit, and that employment benefit would be $20 of income. So there's our $20 in income minus our $7 an hour of cost times the number of hours over our time horizon, so times 350. And in this case here, that gives us 20 minus 7 is 13 times 350. That gives us $4,550 is the benefit we get from employment. Now, what I want to keep in mind here is because we said, hey, our alternative, our next best alternative is just being unemployed. Well, if being unemployed, let's use blue for that. If being unemployed, you get benefits of 0, and let's use A for our cost of unemployment. Let's say that's also 0. So we're getting no unemployment benefits. We have no positive or negative utility or cost of being unemployed. Well, if unemployment is just 0 across the board, then this employment benefit, this is also your employment rent, because it's the rent that you're getting from being employed over that 0 of unemployment. But I bring this up because, well, what if things change? What if we have a situation where you expect, let's say that we have unemployment benefits of $5 an hour. So instead of getting these $0 benefits, we're able to, if we are unemployed, we get $5 an hour. This is like your employment insurance. Great. These are awesome. So they're introduced, but these only exist for the first 6 weeks. So they're not giving you your $5 an hour for your full 10 weeks of your planning horizon. This is only unemployment or employment insurance for 6 weeks. After that, they're like, well, we sure hope you found a job. If it takes you your 10-week horizon to find a job, well, sorry, that's going to be 4 weeks of your horizon with no benefits. Well, if this is the case, if now your alternative is to be unemployed with these benefits, well, that's going to change your employment rent, because the rent, the benefits that you're getting from being employed over the next best alternative are going to be lower, because that next best alternative has a higher value to you. And let's see how we can work that out. Again, let me just clean up that red bit there where we were shading in our employment benefit. Okay, so in this case, we now have, for the first 6 weeks, we have an employment benefit of $5 an hour. I don't know, maybe $5 is roughly there on our axes. And that's our employment benefit. There we go. B for benefit. We could kind of throw all these in. That was C for our cost. And this guy was W for what our wage was. So if we get $5 an hour of benefit, well then, what do we get for the first 6 weeks? So we're 6 weeks. If there's 10, maybe somewhere around there, That is 6 weeks. How many hours is 6 weeks? That'd be 6 times 35. That is 210 hours of employment benefits that we get. And if we kind of just draw up a dotted line there, because our next best alternative of being unemployed would be to get that $5 an hour for the first 6 weeks. And then after that, well, after that, we drop down to 0. So in this case here, we would get our, well, your employment benefit was $45.50. That's what you get for being employed. But to figure out, hey, what is our employment rent altogether, we would want to figure out the benefit altogether. So, okay, that $45.50, but what was the benefit of our next best alternative? That is, what is the benefit that we receive from being unemployed? And in this case here, that is our unemployment benefit altogether, $5 an hour for 210 hours. So that next best alternative is going to be 5 times 210, which yields for us 1,050. To put this another way, we could say that our employment rent is equal to our wage minus the cost times the number of hours altogether. So, hey, in that case there, that was 20 minus 7 times 350, and that gave us our total employment benefit. We then want to subtract off from that our benefit, that is our employment benefit, times the hours of benefit that we end up getting. And in this case here, that was our benefit of $5 an hour. And that was over what? 210 hours. And so altogether, that gives us that first term, wage minus our cost times H. That was our 45.50. That second term there, that was this guy. That is our 10.50. So if we subtract those two from each other, we can get our total employment rent. And that gives us our total employment rent of $3,500. What is this telling us again? Well, this is saying this is the rent, this is the economic gain that we are getting from being employed over our next best alternative of being unemployed. And again, this also incorporates our implicit costs. That is not just the explicit cost of employment, but the implicit costs. That is that C of 7, which is why we have this economic rent or this employment rent. And so in this case here, hey, by working, great, we're getting $3,500 of benefit. Of course, like I was saying, the more you enjoy your work, the smaller that cost would be. So you have a great working environment, you love showing up, well, that's going to be a lower implicit cost of effort, a lower implicit cost of every hour that you work. At the same time, if you hate your boss, if your boss just micromanages you, there's a ton of work, that effort is just every day dragging yourself into the office, well, then that cost is probably actually higher. This cost, you could actually enjoy your work so much that your implicit cost of working is actually negative. It's actually a benefit to you above and beyond your wage with how much you love your job. It just really fits your life purpose. It's your calling. And in that case there, well, we would be looking at 20 minus, say, -3. That is, you would get $3 of benefit for every hour that you're working, meaning you're getting benefit above and beyond what you're actually physically getting paid in your wage. That would be a boost to your employment rent. Okay, so the question then from this is if we can work out this idea of employment rent and say, okay, great, I am getting this benefit of being employed over being unemployed. What happens if we have changes? So if we get increases in unemployment benefits such that, hey, we're getting paid more, what does that do to the rent we get, the benefits we get from choosing to be employed over unemployed? Well, what we could see is that as we get larger unemployment benefits, this part here of our next best alternative gets larger. So for a fixed employment benefit minus a larger unemployment benefit, our employment rents would be falling. Similarly, even if we just kept employment benefits constant, but we provided them for a longer period of time here, well, if we provided them for a longer period of time, similarly, that would be increasing this overall unemployment benefit and thus would decrease our employment rent altogether. The better the alternative is, the smaller our employment rent is going to be altogether. So great, we have this idea that we can figure out what our employment rent is. What is this economic rent that we receive by choosing to work over being unemployed? But one of the questions then is, hey, what is the minimum wage that I would actually be willing to work versus being unemployed? What is that break even point such that, you know what, I am indifferent. I am completely indifferent between working and getting my wage W for my time horizon or being unemployed and getting unemployment benefits for my time horizon. Or alternatively, being unemployed and then maybe getting a new job at some point in the future, right? That could also be part of this. In this case here, what we can do is answer this, well, rather work through to answer that to say, hey, what is that indifference point such that I'm indifferent between actually working or being unemployed? And we call that our reservation wage. Let's write that down, our reservation wage. And this is that minimum. Don't get caught up with minimum wage like the minimum wage law. No, no. This is your minimum wage that you would work for, such that you're like, hey, it is worthwhile for me to actually work rather than be unemployed. Or alternatively, it's that indifferent point where you're like, there's no difference between working or being unemployed. Let's write down what we can work out as an expression for this reservation wage, and then let's talk about why this is the case. So let's write down the expression. So our reservation wage, so we'll write that as wage subscript R, so wage reservation. We're going to say, you know what, I'm just going to write it down, and then we'll talk through what it all means. So that's going to be JB plus A plus H minus J V, and then that whole thing there, that whole bit is then over H, and I'm looking at that and I drew that way too far for that divisor. There we go. We're not dividing the equal sign and the reservation wage by H. So that's our expression. Cool. What the heck does that mean? Well, let's like I said, talk through it. So altogether, J is going to be the time to get a new job. Time to get new job. B is our unemployment benefit. So our unemployment benefit, and that's kind of like what we were just looking at up here. Hey, we had an unemployment benefit of $5. So that's that benefit there. A is in dollar terms our utility from being unemployed. So, hey, if we are unemployed, do we get utility? And that is, right, you get to sleep in, perhaps. You don't have that need to commute into the office. You don't need to put in the effort to work. So maybe there is some utility to being unemployed. Now, mind you, there may also be disutility from being unemployed. There may be social pressures, there may be social stigma. There could be plenty of negative reasons why you don't want to be unemployed. So again, A could be positive, positive utility. You're happier being unemployed, or there's benefits for being unemployed. It could also on whole be a negative to you due to social stigma and the rest. So keep that in mind. A could be positive or negative. Carrying on, H. H is our horizon. So like we had up here, 350 hours, 10 weeks, that's our planning horizon. That's the amount of time that we're willing to consider things over. J, well, we already talked about J. That's the amount of time to get a new job. V, what is V? V is going to be the average utility that we get from other jobs. And that is going to be, we could think about it as this, W minus C. So that is the average wage rate that we get from another job minus the cost of effort on an average other job. What we can do then is rearrange this reservation wage a little bit in order to get it to kind of pop as to what it's telling us. And don't get too worried about this algebraic manipulation. Really, the point I want you to get away is the interpretation of it. So let's go, and what we can do is realize that, hey, this is the same thing as just breaking that up as J, B plus A all over H, and then plus H minus J times V all over H. So that is, we could rewrite it like this. And actually, you know what? I'm going to be a little bit lying here. We're going to do one manipulation first before we do that separation. I'm going to multiply this V into that expression. So rather than V being on the outside, saying H minus J times V, it's going to get multiplied into each one. So I'm going to do two steps here. First, we're going J, B plus A all over H. We're then going plus V times H. So that's HV all over H minus JV all over H. Okay, what I want you to see is that with that, these H's cancel each other out. That's really the big reason why I did that. From here, what we can do is notice that altogether we have V minus JV, and then that is really J over HV. So maybe let's just rewrite that so it's a bit more explicit. We have J B plus A all over H plus V minus JHV. All I've done is just rewritten this whole bit here as this. It's the same thing, I've just rewritten it so it's a bit clearer given the cancellations and the way we're expressing it. Just like we went and said, hey, let's go V times J, V times H, I can do the same thing. I can be like, hey, look, here's a V. I could factor them out, and we would get J, B plus A. I'm just going to throw this H over here rather than having it be under the whole thing, plus, well, 1 minus JH times V. Sorry, that's not a very good H. I'm kind of failing on these little, I don't know, is it the tail or the top? Anyways, the top of the H is there. Great. So now we have our expression of our reservation wage. Let's talk about what this actually means now. What are each of these components? Well, again, J is the amount of time to get a new job. H is your planning horizon, the amount of time period that you are considering this under. So what that is JH is the proportion of your horizon that you expect to be unemployed. So over your 10-week time horizon, maybe you would expect to be able to find a new job in 4 weeks. So the proportion of your time horizon that you could expect to be unemployed for if you were to lose your job would be 40%. That 4 weeks that you expect to take to find a new job all over your 10-week time horizon. Then we have B plus A. On this guy here, let me just change color so it doesn't get too all over the place. B plus A, this is our benefits. This is our benefits of being unemployed. So altogether, that's the unemployment benefit we get in physical money. So the explicit unemployment benefit, as well as A being the implicit unemployment benefit. And that could be, again, negative or positive, depending on our views of being unemployed. So altogether, our reservation wage is saying, okay, hey, what proportion of the horizon that I consider would I expect to be unemployed? And what would that unemployment benefit be? And then plus 1 minus j over h. So hey, if j over h is the proportion of the horizon that I'm unemployed, 1 over j minus h is going to be the proportion that we are employed. So, right, if I say, hey, I'm walking away from my job, I'm unemployed, well, for 40% of the time, again, that was presuming that it takes us 4 weeks out of the 10 to find a new job. 40% of that period, I'm getting these unemployment benefits. And then that means, hey, 40% I'm unemployed. That would mean 6 out of 10, or 60% of the time, I'm employed. And that is, and then for that employed portion, earning V. What is V? Well, V is the benefits of employment, the explicit benefit of your wage minus the implicit costs, your disutility of working. So that is what you're getting from the work side. So W minus C, what you would be earning during that employed portion. So altogether, this reservation wage is really just the weighted average of how long you expect to be unemployed and what benefits you receive, and how long it's going to take you to get a job, and then those weighted average benefits of that job. Putting those two together would be saying at any time I could show up to the job that I currently have and earn my current wage, or you know what, I could not. And if I don't, my alternative is to be unemployed for some period of time, earning this, and then get a new job and earn this. So weighting those two as your next best alternative is how we can determine that rate of indifference between working and not working. And thus we get our minimum wage, our reservation wage, such that at this point here, we're saying, yeah, we're kind of indifferent between showing up or not. Let's take a look at a bit of an example in order to kind of see how this works in practice. And this will help hopefully to concrete a lot of this all together as well. I'll rewrite this formula, don't worry, we'll try to clean it up a little bit. Okay, so here we have some background, but again, like I said, let's rewrite that reservation wage formula. So we have a reservation wage, and that is J over H, B plus A plus 1 minus JH, and then V. What we could do is we could rewrite V as W minus C being our next best alternative, but we don't necessarily need to do that. Okay, so we have that written down just for our reference. Let's go take a look at this scenario and see exactly what's happening. So Maria earns $12 an hour in her current job. She works 35 hours a week. Her disutility of effort is equivalent to a cost of $2 per hour of work. That's her cost. That is how much she dislikes her work. If she loses her job, she will receive unemployment benefits. Okay, that's B, benefits of $4 an hour. Additionally, being unemployed has psychological and social costs equivalent to $1 per hour. So that is our implicit benefits of being unemployed. And in this case, these are costs of 1, so -1. Suppose that Maria's planning horizon is 156 weeks, so that's her horizon, H. And that if Maria were to become unemployed, she would expect to find another job at the same wage and cost, so same wage, same cost, after 44 weeks. That's J. So what I want you to see is we have everything here to figure out what Maria's reservation wage is. And if it wasn't all clear, let's just pick out those values as we went through. So starting off, we said that wage was 12 per hour. I want you to instantly see that we maybe have a discrepancy here because some of these For example, planning horizon is in weeks. We also have time to find new employment is in weeks. And then we have the amount of hours being worked is 35 hours in a week. So we can either express everything in terms of hours or everything in terms of weeks. But we just need to be cognizant of those units and make sure that we are consistent. So let's start off and just write them down as they show up. Okay, so wage is $12 an hour with a cost of effort equal to $2 an hour. We then have a unemployment benefit. That is the benefit of being unemployed. That is equal to $4 an hour. And sorry, I should go HR because H is our horizon, and I don't want that to be confused there. We then have a disutility of being unemployed, and that's equivalent to $1 an hour. And because this equation is set up as A being a benefit, a positive utility of being unemployed, we do want to differentiate that this is a cost of being unemployed by having it be negative. I want to be clear that we juxtapose that with the presumption that the cost of working, your implicit cost of working, is a disutility. So in the fact, if we were to be getting benefits from working, that is, hey, every hour we work gives us extra implicit benefits, that would be a negative cost. And so we would put in C as negative if it was a benefit. So implicit in this functional form is that being unemployed has a positive utility, working has a negative utility. And if it ever flips from that, we need to flip the sign accordingly. Okay, carrying on, we have our time horizon. Our time horizon is 156 weeks. And the amount of time that we expect to be unemployed, well, that's going to be 44 weeks. Okay, from here, we need to make the decision. Are we going to go and turn everything into hours, or are we going to turn everything into weeks? Your choice is entirely up to you. The math's going to work out the same, whichever way you choose it. It's just entirely personal preference. What we could do is we could do both, just so that, you know what, as the learning aid, you could follow along and see the way that that goes. So let's start out. How would we do both? Well, let's start at the bottom and work our way up. So 44 weeks. Let's go and say I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to go move that over because then I can express all my hours here on the left and everything as weeks here on the right, and it's going to be less jumbled this way. So 44 weeks. What's that in hours? Well, we said 35 hours per week. That's from up here. So 44 times 35 means that it's going to take us 1,540 hours to find a new job. What's our planning horizon? Our planning horizon is 156 weeks, 35 hours a week. That means that our planning horizon is 5,460 hours. Okay, now we have W, C, B, and A, and we have these in terms of our hourly impact, but what is that in terms of weekly impact? Well, for A, $1 an hour, we have 35 hours a week, so that's going to be negative 35, negative 35 per week. There we go. So that's our utility from being unemployed. We lose $35 a week in that case. Yeah. What about our employment benefit? Well, instead of $4 an hour, we get 4 times 35. That's going to give us an unemployment benefit of $140 per week. Our disutility from working, our cost of effort, is $2 an hour. $2 an hour, 35 hours a week. That's going to be $70 per week. And then finally, $12 an hour is our wage. 12 times 35, that's going to give us $420 per week. And sorry, I'm looking at this and realizing that some of these I've done per week, some of these I've just done in week. Let's be a little bit more clear. That is $140, right? Each of that, $420 per week, $70 per week, $140 per week, and our disutility of being unemployed, that's $35 per week. Okay. That being said, we now have all the information to solve for our reservation wage. And now it's just a case of plug and play. Doesn't matter which one we use. As long as we calculated these correctly, we should get the same reservation wage, just either in terms of reservation wage, your weekly wage, or your hourly wage, whichever way we go. And you know what? Let's use this one because we just calculated them. Let's not make it be all in vain. So let's calculate our weekly reservation wage. Well, we have J over H, so that is 44 out of 156. Great. What's our unemployment benefit? B. Well, we would get $140 per week if we were unemployed, plus our utility of being unemployed. Well, in this case, it's disutility, so that'd be plus negative $35 a week. We then want to go and say, well, what would be my benefit of being employed? So 44 to 156 is the proportion of time that I'd be unemployed and getting these benefits, plus 1 minus that. So 1 minus 44 out of 156. This is the proportion of time I'd expect to be employed. And I'd be earning W minus C again. That is my value of B, my benefit of employment. I'd be expecting to earn again 420 minus my cost of work, which is 70. Great. Let's go work that through. What is the proportion of time that I would expect to be unemployed? That is about 0.282. So about 28% of my horizon I could expect to be unemployed if I walked away from my job. 140 plus negative 35. So for 28% of the time, 28.2% of the time, I would expect to be earning $105 a week. Then I would expect to get a job. So out of my entire horizon, 71.8 or about 72% of the time, I would expect to be getting my actual future employment rent, my employment benefits, sorry. And we can have that as 420 minus 70. That is, I'm expecting to earn $350 a week over that period. So altogether, how does that work out? 0.282 times 105, that is 2961, plus the period of time that I'm employed, that's going to be 251.30. Is that right? Yep, 251.30, giving us altogether our reservation wage of $280, $280.91 per week. Awesome. That would be my reservation wage, that minimum wage that would entice me to consider entering the workforce, such that I'm indifferent between showing up and working, and then the alternative being unemployed for a period and then a different job. Great, we worked this out as a weekly wage. Well, what does that work out to as an hourly wage? And you're like, oh, Keith, do we have to go through this all again now just with throwing in the hours for each of these parts? No, no. Thank God. What we have to do, we know we work 35 hours a week. So let's just divide our 280.91 by 35. And we would get a rate of, I'm going to round to 2 decimal places here, 8.03 per hour. Great. So in this case here, she has a reservation wage of 8.03 per hour. Let's go and see how this all kind of works out and what we're pulling away from this as we went through. And why we have this formula, where this is even coming from, all said and done. Because it's kind of, we just threw this at you and said, hey, trust me, here it is. And let's go take a look at that. Let's just scroll down because I want to be able to come back and see this. So let's take a look, kind of like what we started with here, where we say, there we go, I'm going to go and kind of use that weird little gray line that I have showing up there. Again, we have, oops, helps if I change to the right tool. There we go. We have our wage, we have our time horizon, our planning horizon. We're presuming that altogether our horizon is 156. We're going to keep this in weeks because, well, it's just what works easier rather than a huge number of, what did I say that was going to be if we did that hours? 5,000 something? Yeah, 5,460. So let's just keep it in weeks to be easy. We have our wage. We have our wage, which we said was, what were we earning? $12 an hour or $420 a week. So here we go, 420. So out of these 156 weeks in our horizon, we could choose to work and we would earn 420 all over that 156 hours. Sorry, 156 weeks. Great. Of course, we have a cost to work. So let's use red for that cost to work. And we have our cost to work at $2 an hour or $70 a week. So our cost is 70. And if we are working for that entire 156 weeks, we earn 420, but we face that cost of 70. Again, that difference, that area in between, that's our employment benefit that we are earning. Awesome. What's our alternative? What is our alternative? If we were not to work, if we were not to earn this 420 minus the cost over 156 weeks, what are we doing? Well, what we are doing alternatively is we are earning this benefit of $140 per week. So that is, we would have our unemployment benefit of 140. But keep in mind, we're only getting this 140 for, where is that? That 44 weeks until we find a new job. So I don't know, maybe something like that. 44. Great. And draw that point up so we can kind of visualize where that is. Okay. So we would earn $140 for 44 weeks. After that period of time, we would then get a new job at the same wage and the same cost. So there we go. That's where we end up for our benefits. But keep in mind, we said, hey, when we were unemployed, we had a cost. Let's again change using colors. We had a disutility of unemployment of $1 an hour or $35 a week. So that is, we had A of 35, and, sorry, let's be a little bit more clear, negative 35. We were losing, this was truly a cost, not a utility. And so that was over those 44 weeks, after which time we were then earning again this cost of effort of 70. So we have this trade-off. We have this trade-off to consider. Do I work at 420 minus my 70 cost for the 156 weeks? Or do I choose to be unemployed for a period of time, getting this unemployment benefit for 44 weeks minus my disutility of unemployment, and then get a new job over the rest of my horizon? Well, let's work out what our employment rent would be. And we can do that just using the way that we said we can define employment rent. So employment rent, this is going to be our wage minus our cost. So 420 minus 70, wage minus cost. Great, that's what we get if we choose to work. But what is the benefit of choosing to work over that next best alternative? Well, that difference is going to be minus our next best alternative, which is to earn 140 minus the cost of being unemployed. So 140 minus, and I should say the disutility of being unemployed. So 140 minus 35. And this difference is only for 44 weeks, because after the 44 weeks, it's one and the same again. So times 44. And I'm sorry, would you look at that? Got to move that over because this is W minus C times that period. So times 44 minus this period here times 44. And my penmanship is terrible. Let's retry that. That is 44. And you might be like, well, hey, Keith, why did we say up here? Oh, sorry, maybe it was on the previous page. Why did we say over here, wherever that might be? Here we go, times h, and then times h that we get the benefit for. Well, in this case, I can say I'm just going to shorten my horizon to be this 44 weeks, not the 156, because anything beyond the 44 weeks is one and the same. There's no difference between those two. So if we go back and take a look at this example, it would be like we get that benefit for the entire period, in which case H and H benefit are one and the same. So I can kind of just ignore that for this time. Otherwise, right, we'd have to work out, okay, this is it, times 156 minus this for 44, and then the exact same thing over the other, what is that going to be? 156 minus 44. So 112. So you can just kind of cheat, not really, but just simplify your work a little bit. What do we get? Okay, so for working for those 44 weeks, we get a benefit of $15,400. We can then subtract off the benefit we get from being unemployed. And again, this is our net benefit because our actual unemployment benefits minus our disutility of 4620. So that is altogether, we get this employment rent. We get an employment rent of $10,780. Or, hey, let's look at this a little bit of a different way. We're getting $10,780 all over this 156-week period. So if we go 10,780 divided by 156 weeks at 35 hours a week, we get an hourly employment rent of $197. So, hey, by choosing to work, we are getting an hourly employment rate of $197 an hour. I want you to kind of see what's happening here because this is kind of really neat. And it's easily lost as we just get lost in the abstraction of the math, especially if you're not comfortable with the math. So there's a lot of cognitive load right now as we're going through trying to figure it out. And you're just like, I'm doing the math. I have no idea what it means. Well, let's backtrack and take a look. What did we say so far? Let's use white. We said that we were earning a wage of $12 an hour, but we had a cost of working of $2 per hour. So that is really our benefit. What we were getting in our terms was $10 per hour. Okay. This is saying that we are getting employment rent of $197. So that is this $10 per hour is $1.97 better to me than the alternative of being unemployed and going through this whole thing. So, okay, the $10 an hour that we are earning minus our employment rent of, oh, why did I do a 9? Let's try that again. 197 per hour. What does that yield for me? So, okay, the benefit that I get from working over my alternative of being unemployed, $10 minus 197 is, big drum roll here, this is the exciting part, 803 an hour. So, hey, in this case, the benefit with the employment rent from doing this gives us the 803 an hour. That is, hey, that's our reservation wage. Or to put it another way, the difference between our reservation wage and the actual benefit we get from working, that is W minus C, the difference between those two on an hourly basis is our employment rent per hour. So all of it works out in this way. This big ugly looking formula, all this big ugly looking formula is just computing for us a weighted average between the benefits we receive while being unemployed and the benefits we receive while being employed. And given the weight of our horizon that we spend in each of those, gives us our alternative, gives us our minimum wage that we would reserve before we're indifferent between entering the labor force or not. And that's all the reservation wage is. So reservation wage plus our employment rent would be our wage after cost, or wage after cost minus our employment rent would be our reservation wage. Okay, let's go and take a look at where we go for this, because great, we found this reservation wage, so this is going to be, hey, that is the minimum amount you have to pay me in order to consider entering the market. That is the minimum amount you have to pay me to just not choose to be unemployed instead. But the question is that enough for me to actually do work? That is, showing up to work and working are very different things. And what I mean by that is, especially if we have this disutility of work of $2, that is a cost of effort. What if I could just show up to work, earn $12 an hour, but not actually do any work? Just completely shirk, completely free ride, and thus avoid this cost of effort. Just kind of hide in the coffee room, take lots of breaks, sit there at my computer, play solitaire, and not actually do the effort that is demanded of me, and thus escape this cost. Should I? Is that something that I should or could do? And let's take a look at this kind of process that we would have to think about in order to figure out, great, we have a reservation wage, that is the minimum wage for me to consider employment. But this is not necessarily the minimum wage for me to consider actually putting in effort. And let's take a look at that distinction here. So we can kind of think about this a little bit in terms of our sequential games in game theory. So far, at a wage, oops, let's use the right tool there. So far at a wage of $12 an hour and a cost of effort of $2 an hour, so that is our V is $10 an hour. We know that this is sufficient to encourage, who did we have in our example? I believe it was Maria. There we go. Maria, right there. Maria earns $12 an hour. So this is enough to encourage Maria to actually show up and choose employment over unemployment. And we know this because Maria's reservation wage is 803, meaning we have employment rent of 197. That is her benefit over the cost of effort minus her reservation wage. She's getting $1.97 per hour that she's employed over the next best alternative. Great. So it's enough to entice her to show up. But is this enough to actually entice her to work hard? And that is, we have a now subsequent branch of this sequential game, which is not just what wage the employer offers, $12 an hour, but whether they offer a wage that's high enough to actually get Maria just to show up or enough to actually get Maria to consider putting in the hard work. And so that is Maria at this point responds to this wage and that payoff and decides what is better for me. Is it better for me to show up and work? Or is it better for me just to show up and slack off until I get caught? And let's go take a look at how that would work out. So I want to change this above diagram a little bit. Rather than taking a look at wage and cost, we're just going to do W minus C. Additionally, just to show that we can do it in both ways, I'm going to do it in terms of hours this time, primarily just so we can see that we can do it both ways, and also because I just wrote everything in terms of hourly costs right here. So let's just do that. So what does that give us? That gives us our vertical axes, our horizontal axes, and this is Maria making the choice. Do I work hard? Her other alternative, of course, is do I shirk? And we'll take a look at that shirking option later. If we work hard, well, she earns wage for her time horizon. And again, what do we say for that time horizon? We said 156 weeks. That is really what we're going to be interested in, 5,460 hours. How did I get that? 156 times 35 hours in a week gives us 5460. Okay, altogether, she's earning a wage of 12. That's her wage, but her wage minus cost is $10 an hour, and her reservation wage is 803. Okay, so if she were to work hard over this 156 hours, there we go, something like that, she would earn this whole area here. This would be her payoff. That would be her payoff. So that would be $10 an hour, wage minus cost, over 5,460 hours. So this would be a payoff of $54,600. The question is, where does she get a better payoff? Does she get a better payoff working hard or shirking? And let's take a look at what the alternative may be. So again, let's do the same kind of diagram here. We have her wage, we have her time horizon. Her time horizon is 156 weeks or 5,460 hours. Again, let's just draw that line up so we can visualize where that would be. In this case, though, if Maria decides to shirk, well, this is kind of where this is in her interest. She's able to earn her wage of $12 an hour, but she doesn't have the cost. She doesn't have that $2 an hour disutility because she's not putting in any effort. Sure, maybe her boss is a jerk, her boss micromanages, but she's not really doing the work. She's just playing solitaire, minesweeper. So there's no negative here. Essentially, she just gets to earn this $12 an hour, and there's no disutility. Great. So in this case, she gets to earn that. But she can't do this. She can't do this forever, of course. She can only do this for S amount of time. Let's say that the amount of time that she can shirk for before she is caught is 90 weeks. Okay, 90 weeks. Again, we're doing things in terms of hours. So what is that? That is going to be 3,150 hours. I want you to keep in mind that's actually pretty impressive. That is, she could shirk at her job. That is, she could show up, get paid, but not actually do anything for almost 2 years before they catch on to her. That's unfortunately, I was going to say pretty impressive. I've actually been in certain employers where I think people have gone a lot longer than that. So maybe it's not that impressive actually. Okay, but what then happens? She shirks for these 90 weeks or 3150 hours, but then she gets caught. When she gets caught, I mean, the employer doesn't want to keep someone who just isn't doing work, so they're going to let her go. If they let her go, she is essentially, for the remainder of that period of time, earning her reservation wage. And you might think, why is she earning her reservation wage of 803? Because this here was the indifference between working or being unemployed. So if she is able to shirk for these 90 weeks or 3150 hours, the resulting what? What would that be? 66 weeks? That resulting 66 weeks, she earns her reservation wage, which is some period of this time she may be unemployed. Well, heck, we said we would expect her to be unemployed for 44 out of those, or 28% of the time, and then 72-ish% of the time be employed again. That's her indifference points. That's what she would expect to earn as her alternative to employment. So if she were to shirk, she shirks until she gets caught, and then she earns her alternative. What we can work out then is what is her payoff for shirking? And her payoff for shirking is going to be this box here. That is her payoff while she was getting her full employment without the disutility, and then her payoff while earning her reservation wage. So we can work that out. S number of weeks shirking, H minus X number of weeks on her reservation wage, so that is 66 weeks. Again, because 90 plus 66 gives us our 156-week horizon. We want things in terms of hours, so again, that's going to be 2,310 hours at the reservation. And so we get payoff for the shirking area. That's going to be $12 an hour for 3,150. Total payoff, 37,800. Total payoff during that time earning her reservation wage. So that's 803 an hour times 2310. That's going to be 18,549 and 30 cents. Add those two together to get Maria's total payoff if she were to decide to shirk. And her total shirking payoff is 56,349 and 30 cents. So what should Maria do? Should she work hard and earn 54,600, or should she shirk and get 56,349? Well, strictly from this perspective here, it should be kind of clear that Maria has a strong incentive to shirk. She is better off showing up, doing nothing until she's caught, and then earning her reservation wage there on out, versus showing up and actually working hard and facing that cost of $2 per hour and earning less. So, oh no, we have this issue where, yes, this employer is offering enough money to encourage Maria to work. They're offering her more money than her reservation wage. So she's like, yes, I would rather work than be unemployed. However, they're not offering her enough money that it is worth working hard versus showing up and just shirking and playing solitaire. Because she's better off just free riding for a period of time until she gets laid off. So we kind of have a bit of a outcome from this to consider. And we could write this essentially what we just worked through, we could write this mathematically. And oh no, more math. Yes, yes, more math. Okay, so this left-hand side, how did we find this box here? Well, ultimately, the way that we found that box was just the time horizon W minus C. That was our V there, right? W minus C, 12 minus 2, gave us V of 10. So great. That was our payoff in this case. On the right-hand side, we had to figure out the area of these two boxes. And how did we do that? Well, this first box, that guy, was just the amount of time we were shirking for times our wage. So, hey, we were willing to shirk for 90 weeks and earn the full $12 an hour while shirking. The other side of it, this side here, this was the rest of that time, H minus S, total time horizon, minus the time that we could shirk for, times our reservation wage. Great. Those two added up gave us that 56,349. So that is what we get to is we should only choose to work hard if and only if what we get paid here is greater than SW times, let's actually use the times, H minus S times our reservation wage. If we get a bigger payoff here, well, then we are worthwhile working hard. Meanwhile, if we get a bigger payoff here on the right-hand side, we would be better off shirking. Okay, great. So the employer accepts Maria, doesn't accept her at a high enough wage that she actually puts in the effort. The question then is, well, does the employer want employees that just shirk? And the pretty apparent answer should be no, they don't. So what the employer then has to do is say, okay, we're not just offering you a wage to entice you out of being unemployed. We need to offer you a wage that not only entices you out of being unemployed, but actually entices you to put in effort as well. If this is the case, what the employer can do is essentially just take Maria's condition here of should I put in the work or should I shirk, and rearrange it to find the lowest wage. Hey, look at that. W wage, W wage. Find that lowest wage such that it is above Maria's shirk condition. So we want to just essentially rearrange this formula to find out the expression for Maria's wage. And let's go through and do that. Few algebraic steps here. Nothing too bad. There's one tricky algebraic trick in there that you wouldn't know to do unless you knew the outcome you were looking for. And that's the part that is going to get caught up. That being said, you'll never actually have to go through and rearrange this. We're just interested in the final form. So start off, sometimes this confuses people. Let's just, for simplicity, go and rewrite it as this. There we go. By rewriting it as that, what we have, oh, sorry, that was an S. I thought that was an R for a second. By writing it like this, because we're saying, hey, the left-hand side has to be greater than or equal to, if I just go equal to, a lot of times we're better doing our algebra rather across an equal sign. This inequality tends to mess students up for whatever reason, but I shouldn't say it's the same thing because it's different, but the algebraic process is identical. So if I can simplify things for you by just writing equals, we'll do that. I want you to keep in mind, though, this is reductionist. This is a simplification. Okay, our ultimate goal is to get W by itself. So to do that, what I kind of want to do is, well, I need to get W by itself. Let's open up this left-hand side. So we have HW minus HC equals SW times H minus S, and then the reservation wage. get W to the same side, so I'm going to minus SW minus SW. So we get HW minus SW minus SHC equals H minus S WR. Let's get this HC over to the right-hand side, so we'll add HC to both sides. So we get HW minus SW equals H minus S reservation wage plus time horizon times our cost of effort. At this point, well, look, we have W common to both, so let's factor that W out. So we get H minus S W equals H minus S reservation wage plus time horizon times our cost of disutility of employment. Okay, here's where the algebraic trick comes in that you would not have seen in simplifying for W had I not shown it for you. And the reason being is we ultimately kind of want our wage that we offer to be more or less independent of the time horizon. And we have H right here. But I want you to keep in mind, we have H minus S, we have H minus S. So we can do a little bit of a neat trick to kind of get the same thing. I can go plus HC, that's already there. I can then go and do this neat trick where I just go minus SC plus SC. And what I want you to keep in mind is, okay, SC, what is that? The hours or the weeks shirked times the cost of employment, shirked times the cost of employment. But minus SC plus SC is the same thing as just adding by zero. So just adding by zero, there's nothing that I really did there. Adding by zero has no effect on this equation. But why would I do that? Because C is common to both of those, so I could factor that C out, and I have H minus S again. So that would give me H minus S times our wage equals H minus S times our reservation wage plus H minus S times our cost plus the amount of time we shirk times our cost. Awesome. Okay, so last thing, let's get that W by itself. So let's divide everything by H minus S, H minus S, H minus S, and H minus S. What you hopefully see is that in a lot of these, this all just cancels out. This leaves for us what? That our wage rate, this would be, I'm going to subscript this as NS, our non-shirking wage rate. This is the lowest rate of wage that you would have to pay me, such that I'm indifferent between actually putting in effort or shirking. That's going to be equal to my reservation wage plus my cost of effort plus, what does that work out to? S all over H minus S times C. Okay, this looks like a whole bunch of nothing. This here is our rent. This is our economic rent of shirking, and it is dependent on the amount of time that I can shirk for before being caught and my cost of actually putting in effort. So this is what you would have to pay me in order to offset that rent that I would get from shirking. Put it in context. Let's go back up here. What's our rent we get from shirking? Well, we have 54,600 from putting in effort. So if we get 56,349 and 30 cents from shirking versus that 54,600 from working hard, well, my economic rent from shirking is 17 49.30 over the total number of hours. So if you were to put that on an hourly rate, so take that divided by 54.60, I'm getting 32 cents per hour of economic rent by choosing to shirk over working hard. So if we were to pay you more, if you were to pay more, then that offsets this economic rent from shirking, and you can be better off, well, indifferent between working hard or shirking. And that's the basic idea there. So let's go work this through. We have all this information. What wage would we need to pay Maria, not just to get her to choose to work over being unemployed, but choose to actually put in effort over just shirking altogether? And to do this, let's go through. We can just throw in the rates that we have. And again, I want to be clear, we could use either weekly or hourly rates in all of this, and we're going to get the same result either way. Again, let's just keep switching between the two so that we can see that we can do either one. So what do we have? We have her reservation wage. Well, we said her reservation wage was $281.05. Keith, where did that come? Well, that was her reservation wage per week, or $8.03 per hour. Okay. What was the cost of employment? Cost of putting in effort was $2 an hour, or $70 per week. What is the rent side here? Well, in this case here, shirking, that was, she got away with shirking for 90, all over 156 minus 90, so all over 66, times cost of 70. Or to put that the other way, she was able to, I'm missing the number of hours, let me just go up and take a look again. There we go, 54.60 was our total hours. She shirked for 31.50. So she was able to shirk for 31.50 hours. We had 54.60 minus 31.50. 54.60 minus the 31.50 gave us H minus S of 2,310 hours. 2,310 hours times our cost of $2 per hour. That was 70 per week. So in each case, plus, 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 we can work this out and we can get what that result is as to her non-shirking wage. And that is working out to 281.05 plus 70 plus 90 over 66 times our cost. And we get a non-shirking wage of $446.50. That is her weekly wage. Or alternatively, would need to pay $12.76 per hour. Okay. Does this actually work? Does this actually make her indifferent if we pay one of these rates? Does it make it her indifferent between shirking or putting in the effort? We can go check. We can go check. We can go back up here and we can rework through this example such that instead of getting paid $12 an hour, she gets paid $12.76 over 156 weeks. She's able to shirk for 90, get her reservation for 66. Essentially, we want to work through this equation and see where she's at. Let's go do it. H, 156. I'm just going to use weeks because they're smaller numbers. What was that non-shirking wage? We said $12.76 an hour, but $446.50 per week. So 446.50 minus the cost. What was that cost? That was a cost of $2 an hour, or over the 35, that is 70. That has to be greater than or equal to the amount of time shirking. Well, she could have shirked for 90 and earned the full 1276.50 or 446.50. I'm just realizing this is all the way through here, pretty sloppy. These look like multiply. These were all plus. My apologies for my sloppy penmanship. Let's just clean that up so it's a bit clearer. So 90 times 4, look at that. Sloppy penmanship again, for 46.50. That looks a bit better. Plus H minus S, so that was the 66 weeks that she'd be earning her reservation wage. What was her reservation wage again? That was $8.03 an hour and 35 hours, so that would be $281.05. Okay, what does the left side equal? What does the right side equal? Well, left side, we have 446.50 minus 70 all over those 156 weeks. We have 58,734 being her total payoff if she were to put in effort. What about shirking? Well, if she shirks, she gets 90 weeks at 446.50. So that is, she gets 90 weeks earning $40,185. And then she gets 66 weeks at her reservation wage. So that is 66 times 281. That is 18,546. What are those two together? Well, 18,546 plus 5185 gives us, I'm running out of room, sorry. Gives us 58,731. So there we go. We are slightly better off. The reason why this left-hand side is a bit bigger than the right-hand side is just rounding as we've gone through, because I've kept everything to 2 decimal places. But we see that, hey, keeping everything to 2 decimal places, slightly better off putting in the hard work, getting a higher payoff than she would shirking. So what's her incentive? Her incentive would be to put in the hard work, which is exactly what the employer, exactly what the firm would want Maria to do. So by setting this efficiency wage, by setting this non-shirking wage at $12.76 per hour or $446.50, we see that Maria is enticed to actually put in the effort, actually put in the work, which is exactly what the firm wants from her. They don't want to hire her and have her shirk. And in reality, to pay her $12.76 per hour versus the initial $12 per hour isn't that substantial. But the difference is they actually get her to actually work rather than shirk. And that's the big benefit here. Okay, what happens if things change? Let's go and take a look at this formula. So we're saying that the wage that the company has to pay in order to get their employees to actually put in the effort has to be equal to their reservation wage plus the cost of effort plus the rent that they would get from shirking to offset that. Keeping in mind, this rent is positively related to the amount of time that they're capable of shirking for, and is also positively related with the cost of effort. That is, if they can shirk for longer, you need to give them higher rent to result in a higher efficiency wage. If the cost of effort is higher, you need to compensate that higher cost of effort with a higher non-shirking wage. So positive relationship between the ability to shirk and the disutility of effort. So that being said, let's say that, hey, the company is able to get some new monitoring technology. This new monitoring technology is able to identify a lot more easily whether or not you're shirking or not. Well, hey, if this new monitoring technology makes it so that you can't shirk as long before getting caught, well, if shirking goes down, then this rent would go down. If this non-shirking wage is just your reservation wage plus your cost of disutility plus that new lower rent, well, hey, by putting in a new monitoring technology, they can also get away with paying you less because they don't need to entice you anymore to work hard. They can instead monitor you and get rid of you quicker if you're not working hard. So monitoring technology results in lower wages. Of course, what should we do? Should we, as a company, get monitoring technology, or should we pay our employees more? Depends on the cost of each. What is the cost of that technology per hour versus what is that going to save us in our non-shirking wage per hour? And company can rationalize that and determine which one's more cost effective. Let's say instead, let's a different example here. Let's just get rid of these red arrows. Okay. What if instead there's a new manager and this new manager comes in, takes over the department, changes everything, and this is actually one of those few times where change is good. And as a result, morale is improving. Because morale is improving, people are happy to be there, people want to put in the effort, very personable guy, and just, want to make them happy as your boss. Well, what's that going to do? Well, during this whole bit here, this new manager increasing morale, all of that has had the effect of decreasing your cost of effort, decreasing your disutility. So as your costs go down, altogether, your cost goes down, the rent you need to get paid to compensate you, to encourage you to not shirk goes down, cost down, non-shirking goes down. Again, this good positive work environment that gives you positive utility, you want to be there, you want to put in effort, all of that has the effect of, again, meaning that you would accept a lower wage and actually still not shirk. That is, accept a lower wage and still be willing to put in the effort because your cost of effort is now significantly lower. So there's this side. Let's get a little bit deeper into it. Let's again just erase these arrows. Okay, well, let's say that all of a sudden unemployment benefits rise. So now there is a higher, I'm running out of colors here. There is a higher unemployment benefit. What is that going to do to your non-shirking wage? Well, you might look at this and just instantly be like, you have no idea what's happening here. Maybe you haven't the whole time, but especially now, you have no idea what's happening here. If you are really lost so far, please watch this again, work through it, double check through the textbook as well. But with this, you're like, where does B show up in this? Well, let's go back. Let's remember where we got this reservation wage from. That reservation wage, this was your proportion of time that you were unemployed and the benefits you got while unemployed. So what was your unemployment benefit? And we presumed in the equation actually that it was plus utility for being unemployed. And then what was your proportion of time that you were employed times the benefits of being employed? We called that V, but really this was your average wage over your average cost of effort in other employment options. Well, hey, look at this. If your employment benefits increase, all else equal, higher values of B, well, you're going to have a higher reservation wage. If you have a higher reservation wage, all else equal, you're going to have a higher non-shirking wage as well. And so you're going to demand that if your unemployment benefits are more substantial. Okay, another example. Let's again just clean up these arrows and take a look at another case. Oh, that's not the eraser. Let's say that we have a situation where the average wage in other firms begins to increase. So nothing's happening where you currently are, but you hear rumblings that, hey, at all of the other firms out there, your next best alternatives, those wages are increasing. Well, if that's the case, those wages are increasing. So V is increasing. All else equal, that is, everything else being the same, your reservation wage is increasing. So if your reservation wage is increasing, so must be your non-shirking wage. So even though maybe initially your boss isn't providing you a wage increase, um, providing you a wage, there's not providing you a wage increase originally, as other firms that are competitors for your labor, they want your labor alternatively, you can say, hey, wait a minute, I could leave here and go there. You're now doing the whole thing of, well, do I have a period of unemployment as I search for this new job at this higher wage? Or do I just stay here and shirk because I could shirk at this wage until they catch me and then go through this search problem? I think they actually had a term for this. Didn't they call this quiet quitting just a little while ago? Huh, turns out that's what's happening. So in this case here, as everywhere else raises their wages, but not where you are enticed to shirk until your non-shirking wage increases to actually entice your effort again. And in this case here, as those wages at other firms rise, it works through your reservation wage to then affect your non-shirking wage altogether. Okay, we've gone through a lot to build this all together. Let's maybe just zoom out and kind of thread the needle to what we've had so far. Let's scroll back up to the top to do this, and then we can continue on to the end of this topic. So starting off, we've said, hey, we have this idea of a reservation wage. And this reservation wage was the point in which we were indifferent between being unemployed for a period of time and then working for another future period of time. If this was our next best alternative versus working today, this reservation wage was that point of indifference, such that it doesn't really make any difference if I work right now or if I'm unemployed for a period and then get a job later. That would be the minimum wage that I'd accept to entice me to actually take the job today rather than being unemployed and then taking a job tomorrow. We then went beyond that and said, hey, whatever wage you get offered above that reservation wage, that's going to be your employment rent. That is what you're getting above and beyond what your next best alternative really was. So hence your employment rent. But that employment rent, although that's enough to get you to want to enter the labor force, that is enough to make you want to seek employment, this employment rent might not actually be enough to entice you to put in the effort. So what we then went to do is said, great, you've accepted a job at $12 an hour, but is this wage actually sufficient to get you to put in effort, or should you just shirk? Based off of this trade-off that you have to consider as a hired employee, you either choose to put in the effort based off of your payoff of putting in effort, or you shirk based off of your payoff of shirking until you get fired. Weighting those two, you decide what to do. Do you work hard? Do you shirk? This then led to the idea that, hey, a firm could just set the wage such that you're enticed to work hard. That is, set the wage such that you're better off working hard than you are shirking and cheating and just free riding. So they go through, they set their efficiency wage, they set their non-shirking wage, such that it's equal to your reservation wage plus your cost of employment plus that rent that you might have received from shirking. This here is ultimately dependent on, well, of course, your reservation wage. So everything we introduced at with, hey, should I work or should I just be unemployed for a period of time? What is my cost of effort? And what is my trade-off between shirking or working hard? Summation of all these together give us that non-shirking wage all together, such that, hey, the employer, think about this almost as your ultimatum game. Your employer knows they can offer you a wage, and you're either going to work hard and make them money or not work hard and cost them money. They can then work through and figure out what wage they need to offer you to actually get the outcome they want. And guess what outcome they want? They want an outcome where you work hard. So they want to set an efficiency wage, a non shirking wage, such that you are actually willing to work hard, willing to put in the effort, because that then makes them money. Okay. But then it still leaves the question, great, we've set a wage. How many people do they actually want working at that wage? And we can kind of take our model and then expand this to all the concepts we've looked at leading up to this point to kind of work that out. And let's go build that up. Okay, so what we could do is we could take a look at our wage, but instead of our planning horizon for a one individual, we could take a look at over n individuals. That is the number of employees altogether. What we kind of want to keep in mind is that out of every person out there, we would all have different reservation wages. We would all have different trade-offs between our choice to work based off of our costs of effort, our disutility of work, but also based off of our utility or disutility of being unemployed. The idea being that if we started off at some reservation wage, there is some minimum reservation wage such that just nobody at all wants to work. That is, it doesn't matter what that amount is. For everybody, they're just like, no, that's too low. However, if you were to start to increase that reservation wage beyond that point, you start to capture more and more and more people who are willing to work, such that at higher reservation wages, that captures more and more people who are saying, hey, now I am indifferent between actually entering the labor market, trying to apply for these jobs, and being unemployed. So you need to let me try again. You need to offer that higher reservation wage in order to attract and retain more employees. Keep in mind, though, that it's not just about the reservation wage. We want altogether this non-shirking wage, which is our reservation wage plus our cost plus our rent of time spent shirking and disutility of employment. This value here gives us some addition that is going to be above and beyond our reservation wage. So we would get, in this case here, something like that. And then parallel lines, your reservation wage plus those values would give us our non-shirking wage rate altogether. From the firm's perspective, then, this is our feasibility set. This is our limit, our frontier of wages. We could, of course, offer any wage above this point and get workers who are willing to work. But mind you, you could also offer a point right on it and get the same result. So any point up above, up to the left of our non-shirking wage would be an inefficient situation. Anywhere on the non-shirking wage would be an efficient outcome. It's right on our feasibility set. Anywhere out here is ultimately not really an obtainable wage, not a great wage, because if you pay somebody this, sure, they'll work for you, but they're not going to put in the effort. They're not going to actually provide you any output, meaning you're not actually any better off. So our feasibility set is up to the left of our non-shirking wage. From here, we then need to figure out, okay, well, where do we end up on this whole thing? Sure, I've identified this point, which would be that N and that wage, but is that actually where we end up and why? How? How would we know that even? Let's go take a look. In order to figure this out, we need to flip the script a little bit. We need to take a look at the other side and say, okay, great, we know what we need to set that wage at to get the worker to put in the effort. But on the other side, we need to think about the firm. We need to think about what is their ability to set the wage. And that is altogether, if we, a little bit of an abstraction, but like in many models, we have to abstract from reality to start off. We could say that the firm's profit is equal to Y minus W times N. Okay, what do all these mean? What are all those numbers? Y would be our revenue per worker. So the amount of product that a worker is able to produce that is then able to be sold. W would be the wage that we then spend per worker. And okay, keep in mind, revenue per worker over a period of time. So maybe this is weekly revenue. So wage would be weekly wage. So, hey, if I'm able to make $800 of weekly revenue and I only need to pay the employees $700, well, then we're making $100 of profit per employee. Multiply that by 10 employees, and we are making 10 times 100, we are making $1,000 worth of profit. The abstraction here, we have no non-labor costs. The only costs are our labor costs, the wages. We'll add those non-labor costs in later, but right now for firm behavior, let's just focus on this. Okay, what we can do is kind of like what we've done already. We've done this with the marginal rate of transformation. We've done this with our ISO costs. We've done this with the indifference curves. What we want to do is create what we would call an ISO profit. And we would want to look at an ISO profit curve. And that would be, hey, for some amount of revenue per worker, how would I fit $1,000 equals 800 minus W times N? What are all the different combinations of W and N that are possible such that my profit is the same, unchanged? This is very similar to our indifference curves where we said, hey, what would be my substitution between cheeseburgers and hot dogs such that my happiness was unchanged? Or in terms of our ISA cost, how could I substitute between coal and workers such that my cost of production was unchanged? Same thing here. It's saying, how could I substitute between the wage that I pay people and the number of people that I hire such that my profit is maintained? What this gives us, let's just kind of recreate this so that we don't have it too convoluted. We would get something that looks like this. We would have a variety of different W's, variety of different N's. Let's start off, hey, if we had a wage of 800, well, okay, that should be pretty clear. At that 800, we would have boom, boom, something like that. We would have profit of 0. I use the Greek letter pi to denote profit. You can think of that as the size of the pie. In this case here, they get no pi. However, as the wage rate falls and N can change accordingly as well, we would get varying ISO profit curves such that they would go something like this. In each of these cases, this could be something like profit of 500. The blue one could be something like profit of 1,500, profit of 2,000, and I don't know, maybe the last one here is profit of 3,000. I'm just making these numbers up. What I want to get away from this is that as we go down to the right, our profits get larger. Meanwhile, as we go up to the left, our profits are getting smaller. So we end up getting this trade-off as we move in between. Now, thinking about this from a firm's perspective, does the firm want to obtain the highest possible profit or the lowest possible profit, or do they just not care about profit? I hope you were able to correctly identify the point of the firm, the reason that they exist, what they're trying to do is get the highest possible profit that they possibly could obtain. So that is, if we were to then bring these both together, let's again just redraw this. I'll scroll down a little bit. We have our wage rate, we have our number of workers. Let's say we have some isoprofit curves like this. So again, let's go profit of, I'm just making these numbers up, profit of 500, profit of 1,000, profit of 1,500, and profit of 2,000. If we had some non-shirking wage rate, so something like, let's go like this right there. So this was our non-shirking wage rate curve. What we would want is some profit such that it's the highest possible profit we could obtain with the lowest wage paid. Okay, well, this non-shirking wage rate is our feasibility set, and you can look at it and go, hey, look at this. Right there, right there, those 2 points are on our feasibility set and on a profit curve of 500. Looking at the next one, profit curve of 1,000, you're like, oh, we can't get there. It's beyond our feasibility set. True. What I want you to keep in mind, though, is although we've only drawn profit for 500, profit for 1,000, there's likely an infinite number of profit curves, ISO profit curves, in between these two. And that is, if we keep in mind, if we were to move somewhere like that, well, hey, that is a higher profit because that is down to the right. So positive profit as we move down to the right. So that would be a higher profit than this ISO profit of 500. There is going to be some ISO profit curve then that just touches this feasibility set, this non-shirking wage curve. And if we were to visualize that, we could kind of say that would be something like that maybe. Let's say just again, ballpark, maybe that's something like an ISO profit of 900. We would say right there, that is where we are just at that $900 ISO profit curve, and we are on our feasibility set. We cannot get to any higher level of profit than that. That would give us our number of workers that we want to have employed, and that would give us the corresponding wage rate that we would need to pay them in order to keep them employed. So in this way here, whole big backstory to figure out what wage do we pay our workers based off of the reservation wage. Am I indifferent between working or being unemployed? Then that's not enough. It's not just enough to be indifferent between being working or unemployed. We need to find the non-shirking wage rate such that you're indifferent between working hard and being employed but shirking. And that gives us our efficiency wage. That gives us our feasibility set. We would then want to figure out for some wage rate, some wage non-shirking curve, what is the highest level of profit that I can obtain given that wage rate? And that's going to be where they just kiss each other, where they're just tangent. Okay. A lot going on there, but this last bit is just very similar extension to what we've already looked at. what we've already looked at with the marginal rate of substitution, marginal rate of transformation, where your feasibility set and your indifference curves were just touching. Same idea here, where your feasibility set and your ISO profit curve is just touching, giving you the highest possible level of profit. In the same way as before, you wanted to choose your cookies and hot dogs such that you got the highest possible happiness. The indifference curve, that was the farthest out. How can we use this then? Well, we can use this to explain a few different things in the world around us. And let's start off by taking a look at employment and unemployment. And let's just take this curve, this graph right here, and let's just expand upon it a little bit, or simplify it maybe. I'm just going to redraw it so it's just that non-shirking wage curve and that $900 ISO profit. Okay, so we've redrawn it. In this case here, we have our non-shirking wage curve. We have our ISO profit of 900 that just kisses it. But I've also included in here our reservation wage. I've also included in here some notional wage rate and some notional number of people that the firm would want to hire, the rate of employment altogether, given that non-shirking wage to obtain that profit. What I want you to realize, though, is that at this wage rate is sufficient to entice a lot more than 50 people to want to work. And again, I want you to be very clear on this difference, the difference between wanting to work and actually working hard. And that's the big difference, right? Your reservation wage is your wage that you would want to work at, that you would leave being unemployed. Your non-shirking wage is the wage that you would need to actually work hard. So what we would see is that at 600, the firm could get 50 employees who are willing to work hard, but at a wage of 600, if we go all the way over to our reservation wage, right there, we get something that's a lot more like, I don't know if that's 50, maybe this is 80 people who are willing to work, right? There's a lot of people. There's 30 people here who are willing to work at this wage of 600, although only really 50 of them are willing to work hard at that wage. The rest of them, they'll show up, but they'll probably shirk. That is, the non-shirking rate isn't enough for these extra 30. Now, of course, this is where that earlier part of the chapter comes in, where we talk about the principal agent problems, we talk about imperfect contracts and asymmetric information, how we identify good employees, bad employees, and the rest. We still have to, because 80 people are applying for these 50 jobs. 50 of them will actually work hard. An additional 30 are just going to free ride and shirk. The ideal scenario would be if you could identify just the 50 who are actually willing to work hard at that wage rate and leave these additional 30 as unemployed because they're not actually willing to work hard, they're just willing to show up. What we call this, right, we're always going to have this degree because if we're paying efficiency wages, we're always going to have more people willing to leave unemployment than we are willing to work hard. This here, this difference, this is what we refer to as frictional unemployment. There is a job available for you. You are unemployed. You just might not be the right you might not be the right fit for this job. You might not be willing to put in the amount of work that they need for that wage rate. It's not the right fit for you. So although there is some level of unemployment, some turnover to maintain these 50 employees, there's going to be some level of unemployment that will always exist because we are paying higher than the reservation wage. We're paying enough to pull extra people out of being unemployed. We're enticing them to enter the labor market, but we're not actually paying them enough to have their non-shirking wage. And keep in mind, if we just then were to increase the non-shirking wage, well, we'd have the same problem again. And we'd have excess unemployment, this frictional unemployment in that case there. So we would always expect to witness this degree of frictional unemployment or voluntary unemployment Seems kind of a perverse way to say it, but it's that extra unemployment where you're willing to leave the unemployed, enter the labor market, but you're not actually enticed to not shirk at that wage. Hence, you're ultimately going to be unemployed, or you get employed, you shirk, and then you become unemployed because of it. Okay, there's a few other ways that we can then implement this model. And let's back up and take a look at this. Okay, let's say here we are, and we have our situation. So we have our ISO profit of 900, we have our non-shirking wage curve, we have our reservation wage. Let's say that the government were then to impose a minimum wage. Well, what ends up happening as that takes place? Well, the minimum wage has a few different scenarios. We could set a minimum wage that is below the current wage. So set a minimum wage that's below the current 600, or set one that is above that current wage. So we set a minimum wage at 700. So let's look at each of those scenarios. Maybe first we set our minimum wage at 400, and then we'll take a look at where we set it at 800, and we'll take a look at the outcomes in each of those cases. So first, government comes in, they set a minimum wage, and they set it at $400. What does that do? Well, in order to demonstrate this, let's just presume, and I know my scale is not going to be great here, but let's presume that currently this intercept is 300. Okay? The problem is you can't pay 300. So there's this whole period until the line breaks 400 that you can't actually pay somebody this non-shirking wage because it's less than 400. So the result would be we get a kinked wage non-shirking line, something like that, such that at 400, the line comes in, that is, we could do it this way, ceases to exist there, and then boom, we hit 400 where we were actually starting to get a non-shirking wage increase beyond 400, and then it starts to climb thereafter. So 400 is the minimum rate that you can pay, and then once we start breaking that N minimum, we then start to increase that non-shirking wage thereafter. What I want you to keep in mind is that in this case where we've set a minimum wage below our W star, W prime of 600, it's had no effect on our model at all. ISO profit of 900, we're still maximizing our profit, highest possible ISO profit we could obtain, where those just kiss each other. So no impact being had at all. But what happens if we do this guy? Well, let's go take a look. Let me clean this up and then we'll restart and take a look at a wage prime, or sorry, a minimum wage set above wage prime. So we'll set a minimum wage at 800. Okay, let's say we set our minimum wage now at $800. Well, in this case, it's going to be the same idea. We get this kinked wage no shirt at 800 such that you can't pay less than 800. So if that's 300, maybe that's a bit high. Maybe let's go and lower that 800 a little bit. There we go. Not like this really matters. Scale is all relative, but let's try to get it somewhat better. So there we go. If that's 800, what we get is we get our no shirking wage cutting across like that. So we can't pay anybody less than 800, meaning until that end here, we still have to pay them $800, even though there was a non-shirking wage that was less. What that means is that this non-shirking wage below that $800 is essentially gone. And I deleted a bit of that new one. Let's just redraw it there. There we go. What you can then see is that the result of this is we can no longer achieve this 900. Our new feasibility frontier is this new kinked wage non-shirked. Our feasibility set is anything up above to the left, and that is this profit of 900 is now unobtainable. So what ends up happening is we need to have a new level, new ISO profit that we are obtaining. And let's see if I can draw this. There we go, something like that perhaps. And this would be a profit of 8 50. Up to the left, lower levels of profit. Again, we're going to pick a point where it just kisses. In this point here, it's going to just kiss at that kink. And because it's just kissing at that kink, we get a higher wage. And we also get a higher amount of employment altogether. So in this case here, our minimum wage pushes up the wage, pushes up the level of employment, but we get lower levels of profit altogether amongst the firms. Big assumption here is that the firms are capable of taking lower levels of profit. Of course, if these firms were already approaching zero profit or this pushes them into a negative profit scenario, well, then we're going to have firms shutting down. This isn't going to be possible. And setting that wage rate, that minimum wage rate higher, may actually result in a loss of employment altogether. But in this scenario where the firms were earning positive profit and were able to absorb, they weren't willing to, but they're able to absorb some of that, the minimum wage pushes up the wage, pushes up the rate of employment, and drops the profitability of the firms altogether. Okay, that was the whirlwind overview of Unit 6, Firms and its Employees. There will be another video of this where I go through some specific examples. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out. Either leave comments below, send me an email, or in class. Thanks, until next time.